Hi everyone, it's Mrs. Wine. Welcome back to art class. This week, I'm going to be demonstrating to you how you can use colors to create an interesting sky for your background. So one of the things you're going to need is you're going to need the paper that you used last week where you practiced mixing and blending different colors. This will help give you ideas for what kind of colors you could use in your artwork this week. You will also need a brand new piece of paper. A heavyweight or watercolor paper will work best. You will need your watercolor set, your brush, your napkin, and your cup of water. You might also want to get a piece of newspaper to place under your artwork. This will help keep you from making a mess on the table where you are painting. So once you have gathered all of your supplies, you are ready to get to work. I always want to start by rinsing my brush, making sure it's clean so that I start with a nice clean brush. Then I want to go back and I want to think about how I want my sky to look. Last week, I was working on painting a sky that was sort of blues, purples, and reds. I even practiced mixing some of those colors on my paper so I would know how they look. Now, one thing that will help make sure my colors don't get too dark this week is if I use a wet on wet technique. So one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put just a little drop of water down into the colors I plan to use today. I might even try adding a little orange, so I'm going to put a drop in there just in case. So while my paints are getting wet, I also want to begin by wetting my whole paper. Now I want to be careful not to scrub into the paper. I'm just placing some water on it. I don't want this metal part of my brush to scratch my paper because that will leave marks behind when I paint. So once my whole paper has been wet, and you can tell it looks kind of shiny now, then I'm ready to start adding my colors. And I could start with a little bit of blue. It doesn't have to go on perfectly even because I can see when I'm looking at the picture of the sky, the clouds in the sky are not even. As I get a little closer to the bottom, I don't want it to be too dark. I can come in. And here's where I can start to add a little bit of that red. I want to rinse my brush, make sure it's clean. I can add in a little bit of that red. If it drips, it's okay. You just blend it in. So this painting technique is pretty quick because the idea is I want to paint while my paper is still wet. And I could even add a little bit of orange down in here. I probably don't want the orange to get up in the part where it would mix with the blue because that would make it a little brown and wouldn't look very good. Now, one thing I can do once I've finished and my paper is still wet, if I want to try to add some areas where there might be some clouds, so some little areas that are a little bit whiter, one thing I could do is I could take my napkin, and while the paper's still wet, I could come back in here and I could sort of blot or soak up some areas away in kind of a cloud shape. So that might make it a little bit interesting. So I could try that in a few areas. It's important every time I blot, I sort of turn my napkin around so I'm working with a clean area. And that's it. So now I have a beautiful painting with my sky I've blotted a few areas away for the clouds, and I'm finished. So remember, if you have watercolor paint at home, you can certainly use it this week to try to paint your sky. If you do not have watercolor, make sure you watch the video that I am posting that shows you how to make your sky using crayons. I hope you enjoyed this painting process. Have a wonderful week, and as always, keep on creating.